Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons, your favorite tabletop role-playing game news, reviews, and game design information. I am Shawn Merwin here with someone who's about to strike back, apparently. Teos Abadia. What's this? I read the show notes and there's a Teos strikes back, and I don't know what you're striking back about.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you have a friend and then you find out something? You know, like when you're watching the Lorecast. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, look, here is a little miniature table I'm holding up. You know what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'm flipping it. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. I flipped my miniature table because the Lorecast is going down.
Oh, okay.
You know, I'm going to summon like some, fiery spell in my hand, and I'm going to like ready to cast it. And then if I decide to do something else, oh, wait, the spell's gone.
And you've used up
I guess I can't use it. Slot. So, yeah, I lost my spell slot. So I guess maybe the Lorecast is right.
Yeah, sorry about that. We were talking about this specific topic on the Lorecast, and I wasn't going to mention it. And I'm like, we've teed it up so perfectly. And I thought for sure someone would say, Teos is right.
Oh,
and no one
backed me up. Except in the comments, I saw a number of stalwart heroes who defended me in the comments. Shout out to those kind, very intelligent individuals. Mm-hmm. They're heroes.
Speaking of heroes that are kind and intelligent, our listeners out there will chat with us sometimes via Patreon, Discord, via YouTube, Mastodon, Bluesky, at our email, which is masteringdnd@gmail.com. Sometimes in real life, sometimes we just imagine it. Yeah. But they do talk to us, and so we're going to take some of those questions and comments today. We're going to start with Avenging Blowfish 6953, who comes to us via YouTube saying, I love designing these kind of environmental encounters, but unfortunately, my players are not very tactically minded, and it becomes extremely brutal for them until I explicitly point out what they can do, and it becomes much easier. The example that Avenging Blowfish gives is the characters had to disrupt these cult enchanters, but in the middle of the room was a roper with these long tendrils that were grappling the players and pulling them away. And the players got extremely frustrated because they were spending their actions breaking the grapple or attacking the tendril holding them to free themselves. And then they had no action left over to disrupt the ritual, only to be grappled by the roper again before their next turn. And the Avenging Blowfish said I had to give them free intelligence checks as an excuse to point out to them that instead of freeing themselves, they could free the next player in the initiative order, and then that person could move forward to interrupt the ritual. I had hoped that they would figure that out on their own, but there was no way. They would have gotten it, and I was tired of them complaining about how, quote, unfair the encounter was. Any success stories on training players to be smarter, or is this just something I need to accept with them? My answer is, honestly, this might be something you just need to accept. Is there a way to do the work to train them or to make them see things? And yes, there are, but it might not even be appreciated or wanted. Teos, why don't you go ahead?
I'll take a slightly different tack. I think that it's sort of like puzzles, right? Like usually at any table, you'll have some people who love puzzles, some people who hate them, and something in between. But it's possible that your group is all one way or the other. But what I've found is a really simple puzzle, like a riddle that everybody knows, or a really quick kind of like takes you, trial and error of 3 times and you're done, is actually usually pretty fun for everybody. And one or two might, grumble a bit and sit back, but generally it works pretty well because it's in such a small dose, but it still kind of tickles that other brain and accomplishes the point of what you want out of a puzzle. Similarly, I think that with tactics, it might be that this Roper thing had a little too much that had to do with both game and situation, like the mechanics, like the readying and things like that, or the initiative turn order. So you might try just different things that are really like obvious because maybe that's their fun in yours too, right? So I remember something I put once in, I think it was in Howling Void. There was a flesh golem, and then there was a way that enemy spellcaster could cast lightning, right? Mm-hmm. And if you have the knowledge beforehand, you know that they know that lightning empowers a flesh golem, then you could, or heals them. I forget exactly what it does actually, but it's good to them. Mm-hmm. You could have that already known, it's in the notes of an enemy or something. And now the situation is simply just stop them from doing that. And that itself can feel tactical enough for that group, right? But it's spelled out for them. They know what they're doing, but it's a thing to do beyond just fighting in this encounter. That can be kind of fun. I don't know what you think.
I think that one of the problems that sometimes we run into as game masters with players is that they only look at what's on their character sheet. Mm-hmm. And there are many things that are not on their character sheet that go into a game. And I say this both in terms of storytelling and trying quote unquote different things, as well as just rules that are not on their character sheet. An example I will give is I had an encounter where it was very important that the characters move the enemy off of a certain spot that they were on. And what the players, and this was at a convention, so multiple tables, and 99% of the time, the players were looking on their sheets for, well, I have this spell that can push. Oh, I have this fighter's, what's the tactical fighter, right?
Battlemaster.
Right? Battlemaster's maneuvers. So they're looking for these things without realizing or without remembering that as an unarmed strike, you can just shove.
Right.
And so if you
or just say, here's what I want to do.
Right. Sometimes even the most tactical players get stuck on their character sheet and not in the larger game as a whole. What might help then is for you to make cards that say, hey, don't forget, you can grapple. Yeah. You can do these other things that even if it's not your big thing that you're doing the major damage to contribute to this encounter, you can still do these other things. Yeah. For 4th edition, there was a rule that said you could use your action to let another character make a saving throw. And this was back when it was a save ends sort of situation. Constantly, you were constantly making a save for save ends. And so many times when we were in a situation where we had 2 or 3 people stunned, I would use my turn to allow someone else to make a saving throw. And it wasn't an ability on your character sheet. It wasn't a special feature. It was just anybody could do it at any time. And the game master would look at me like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, it's right. It's literally right here in the rules. It says one of the things you can do on your turn is this. But we don't think of it a lot of times as players because we're so locked in on our build or the things that we can do. And so part of that education can be explain this, show it, maybe make a prompt for it, and then create a situation where it is important to happen. So you're teaching not just intellectually this could happen, but physically teaching them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. You can also have an NPC in the scene that does the thing. I've shared before. I think I did a thing in 4th edition with all these really neat, like tavern brawl things in a tavern where they didn't have weapons. And they did not want to do the things that were available. I'm like, oh, there are chairs, there are bottles. And they're like, meh. And they didn't understand because I hadn't really telegraphed it that there were actually really cool, like sort of equivalent of 4th edition powers they could do based on the bard that I'd, spent all this time making. So then what I had was the enemies started doing them. And then some of them began to do it, but not even all of them. And I was sort of shocked. And that was my own learning method that, you really have to make it super obvious. And I think that's where I'd start is just make things super obvious and super straightforward. What you would think is not even a tactical decision. See if that works. Take it forward from there. And then you can maybe dial it slowly up.
Yeah. And like Teos said, have the enemies do it. Have the goblin horde that's coming start to, oh, there's a fire 30 feet away. The first goblin runs up and it pushes you 5 feet. Oh, the second goblin comes up and pushes you 5 feet. And all of a sudden you realize that these 12 goblins that didn't look like much of a risk are pushing you toward this fire. Oh, that's something that we could also do later in the encounter, right?
Yeah.
When that becomes something important. So you can train the players to quote unquote be smarter, but it is a teaching process, and sometimes the teaching process doesn't go well depending on the students you have. So keep that in mind. Our next question comes from Nicholas Fingaz via YouTube.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
that was a name so good I had to share it with my wife. Like, here's the fun part about reading these things live on the air.
Yeah. Some games give GMs a currency from which to pull, such as Doom or Fear Points, to make things worse for the PCs. What's the purpose of that approach? I don't get it. It seems to add bookkeeping while limiting the Game Master's tools to shape the seeds. Most of the time I've seen it, it's been in a system in which the GM has fiat to do anything, and so do the points mean anything at all. I don't like it, and I feel like I must be missing something. I'd like to hear your thoughts. So, in many games that have this form of currency, the GM does not have the freedom to shape the scene or do whatever they want in the same way that they have that ability in D&D. So that is the point of the currency. It is a tool and a game mechanic that adds a prompt or permission for the game master to interact. So in Critical Role's RPG called Daggerheart, I can only talk about the version I play tested. It had that hope and fear as a mechanic. So even if the player succeeded on a task, if they generated fear instead of hope, the game master got a currency with which they could interact with the game. This is the way the game is meant to be. So the game master sits back, waits for this prompt, which is great. It sets up the narrative as well as the mechanical aspect of the game and of the story. The problem comes then when no one succeeds with hope, or no one actually rolls with hope at all, or fear, right? So in the game I played, Chris Sneezak was running the game, and we were all succeeding with hope. So he was sitting there with no fear, and therefore no way to get his action into the game. So it's
which
not
perfect. They tweak that rule so it's a little different now, but exactly, because of that,
exactly. And Fate is a little bit different because it uses fate points to regulate game flow, especially in combat. So the thought is, I, as the game master, I'm going to make your life more quote unquote interesting, in the Chinese proverb sort of, may you live in interesting times. But when I do that, I am giving you then a way to get yourself out of that trouble. And so what it does is it takes that. Sometimes you'll get a game master who just throws so much trouble at the players that they don't even realize how deep the players are in. This is allowing a game master to do that while giving the character the physical game element means of getting out of that trouble. I'm going to stop there. Teos, add thoughts.
Yeah. There are a number of games that do this. It is actually kind of surprising when you think of just how many games like Savage Worlds has a Benny's system. And so the point of it is supposed to be, by and large, to sort of give you, sort of like Action Points did in 4th edition, or even you could say Heroic Inspiration works in 5th. The point being, you have little agency to go, you know what, no, I want a better chance of succeeding. And so you can spend your Benny and do a reroll, or reroll your damage, or not be stunned because you took damage and things like that. So that's a fun thing. But when you use that, then the DM has their own pool. And in some games, the pool goes back and forth, right? Like with that hope and fear mechanic, with Fate. Or in the Modiphius games like Star Trek Adventures or Dune, you have this sort of momentum that players have that's a group party pool And that allows you to do really cool things. So ideally, you want it in the middle where everybody can see it and everybody can, I could do this. Do you guys, is it okay if I spend one of our points that are in the pool? And what's neat is that forces, so why does this exist? Because obviously I could just do whatever my character sheet does, but by moving it to this central pool, I establish, or the game establishes, a way that the players can want to speak together and push a little further than what the game wants you to do as default to get that extra move action to make it to the control panel, or shoot one more time because maybe that will take down that key foe that's holding the kidnapped victim or whatever. But when you do those things, when you spend one, the GM gets one. And now you know that the foes, and in fact, that's also a visible thing, is you get to see their pool of threat or whatever it's called that's over there building up. And then when their characters start unleashing that, right, that's when now you've got to prepare and react to that. And that can be fun. My favorite game that did this was Spycraft. Spycraft, which was one of the old D20 games, it had a nice way where you could do these things to kind of get benefits. But every time you did, the DM got more. And what DMs would almost always do is wait until that climactic battle. And so if you think of James Bond, where you go through all these early scenes and you're fighting, the pick your nationality that is our current enemy, and blowing them away because they're all just sort of minion dudes. And then you get to the big boss, right? Or even the henchman that's supposed to be super cool. Now they can spend those to make sure that you get that cool experience and the cinematic flair that you expect in such a fight. And that's actually a more effective way to do it and more interesting to the player DM dynamic than if the monster just had that hard-coded, if I fail, I can re-roll X times, right? And it's giving more latitude to the DM, more creativity, and that's kind of cool. Other things that DMs could do, one of them, which was very famous, was players would throw a flashbang grenade and roll a 1. And the DM would play one of those chips to say, and it's at your feet in the middle of all of you. You're all blinded, it's just, or your weapon jams or whatever, but those kinds of things. Right. And you learn to kind of love that as part of the gameplay.
Yeah. With games that we play as kids, we're used to having everyone gets their turn. Mm-hmm. And when it's your turn, you do the thing. No one else can do anything. And then it's the next person's turn and no one else can do anything. And you go around that way. And D&D sort of reinforced that in a role-playing game. It separated, in a lot of ways, the story element from the game element. So it was, we are playing a game. We have finished the game portion. Now let's tell stories. We have finished the story section. Now let's have combat. And what games have tried to do since is instill this idea that you can tell a story and play the game at the same time. Mm-hmm. But it requires you then to think outside that box of turn, DM, turn, DM, to allow more storytelling, to allow more flexibility. And that's one of those things that this currency tries to do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that as GM you have to do with any one of these games is find the way your style can work with these, right? An example I would give of something that doesn't kind of work for me is in Numenera, where you have the capability to intrude, do a GM intrusion upon the game. To me, that's just being a GM, right? Like if I want an extra bad guy to show up, they should just show up. And I dislike breaking the immersion of the moment and the gameplay to say, hey, Sue, I'd like to give you a GM intrusion and entice you with an XP point and one that you can give to a friend if you will accept another bad guy showing up right now. And they'll probably say yes. And then, okay, now to me, that broke everything. And I've talked to people who like using them and I hear what they say, but in the end, it just doesn't super work for me. So I don't use that, right? But I like the rest of the system. And so it all works out. But, sometimes a particular mechanic in a system just, maybe it's me, right? But that happens sometimes.
Yep. It depends on the level of storytelling that the players and the game master decide to share ahead of time.
Yeah. Or are already doing without any system versus needing a system to give it, right? So that can be a lot of,
Yeah. All right, that's our news and or that's our viewer listener section. Let's get to our news and commentary, starting with. Yeah, I am.
Should have readied an action
to
cast the spell of next section,
but I wasted that spell slot, and then I rolled a 1 anyway. But we're going to just get right into news and commentary, starting with pre-orders for the Eberron Forge of the Artificer source book, now available on D&D Beyond. Mm-hmm. How much is this book? It must be $50 if it is an Eberron source book, right, Teos?
No, it is $30 in print. And honestly, we had actually even on this show talked about how there was some whisper of a lower price point. Both, I think a while back, they'd said they were going to experiment with different price points. And then I think specific to the Eberron, they'd sort of suggested this. And here it is. It's only $30 in print. If you buy it on D&D Beyond, it's $20 digital or $40 as the bundle. So it's a really cheap buy. Why? I have no idea, right? And if I know Wizards, it could easily be that at whatever point they make this decision, the whole world was different. And so it may not even be a solid test of whatever they may have decided to test back then. Who knows? Does this mean we get less book, or, is it soft cover? Is it whatever? You never know, right? I think Dark Sun famously had a creature catalog that was a second hardback book, and that was a mistake. It was supposed to be soft cover, so you never know how things go. The bundle gives you a dice set called Artificer's Forge and 5 exclusive maps. On the D&D Beyond, or the Roll20 side, Roll20 is giving you like $120 worth of stuff to buy it from them, either instead of or in addition to. And they're giving you all kinds of other sort of Eberron-themed products to throw in to sweeten the deal. So you can review all your options, and in the end, I'll just be reading paper anyway. So,
yep. And we know, or at least we've been told, that within this product are 4 revised Artificer subclasses, a new Artificer subclass called the Cartographer, 5 revised species. We can assume Shifter. I'm assuming Warforged.
Yeah.
I'm assuming Changeling. Yeah. And we'll see what else is thrown in there. The Kalishtar. What's the one I'm missing?
How about a new Dragonborn? Let's just make another version. Come on, Shawn.
No. I want my Eberron stuff. And anyway.
Yeah.
We have then 17 new backgrounds, 28 new feats, with the possibility that most of those feats relate to dragon marks.
Yeah, since we've been greater and minor, and
will be handled through there. New spells, bastions, magic items, and then 3 distinct genre-based campaign templates for building fantasy noir, political thrillers, and pulp adventure campaigns in the world of Eberron, with 20 new monsters, each inspired by one of those campaign models. So digging into this original idea for Eberron, which is pulp noir, harkening back to the post-World War I, post-World War II sort of spy, Cold War stories.
Detective, Jeremy had said we would see some of these settings come up with additional releases, so here we go. This may be a test for every setting, right? If this book does well, maybe we see another Planescape or another whatever, choose your another Spelljammer. Maybe the War Captain's Companion equivalent will come out. Who knows? A lot will depend on how these sales go. And of course, the sales could have less to do with the quality of the thing and more to do with global tariffs or who knows what, or recession. So it's always hard to know with these kinds of tests, but this feels like a test within a test. I'm excited for it. It's going to, of course, be compared to the Eberron hardback book, which a lot of people feel is one of the finest campaign settings 5th edition has seen in terms of completion, ability to really create your own adventures in that setting, reflecting the heart of the setting, empowering GMs. We'll see.
We will see. And another thing we'll see is what's going on D&D Beyond. And we have new D&D Beyond news, starting with the Unearthed Arcana horror subclasses.
Wow.
So we are seeing a wave of horror coming from Wizards of the Coast, and this time not their decisions, but their actual content. So
no subclass of the open gaming license?
Exactly. So what do we get? We get 5 revised subclasses. The College of Spirits Bard, the Grave Domain Cleric, the Phantom Rogue, the Shadow Sorcery Sorcerer, and the Hexblade and the Undead Patron. So that's 6, both for Warlock, as well as new subclasses for the Artificer, called the Reanimator, and the Ranger, which is the Hollow Warden. By the time you hear this, the survey will be open to get your feedback. All of this is available on D&D Beyond. Any thoughts in general?
I was talking to some friends who are designers and kind of comparing this approach to 3rd edition, because in a lot of ways, the release schedule that D&D has been communicating is different than how 3rd and 3.5 did it, right? So 3rd had the and I forget exactly the names of these books, but something like, there was a one for bards and monks or something, the Stone and Fury and Twist and I can't remember those names right now, but they're right behind me. And then they just basically republished them for 3.5, and everybody felt they had to buy them, you had to see what had happened to your character, especially in organized play where you now had to make this transition, and you'd go, oh, my Deep Warden is now nerfed, or oh, my blah 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 is super strong, oh, nobody should ever play this subclass again, prestige class. And this feels sort of like that, but it's pulling from different books. And I don't super love that. I guess some folks will be happy that you don't just have to rebuy Tasha's or whatever. But when all of a sudden, your Grave Domain from this one book and your Phantom from this other one, and it creates a little bit of a mess as to what's been upgraded and what hasn't. And maybe Wizards would say, well, it doesn't matter. You can always play with the old version, but, it's hard to use in D&D Beyond. DMs may want to see you go to one version of the other, and so this just makes it tricky for everybody.
Yeah. I didn't look at it other than to read the general blurb, because I'm in the middle of making horror-themed subclasses and classes and spells and backgrounds and new rules. And so I've already seen some of the things that are probably in here already ideated with the stuff that I'm reviewing. And I just want to say right now, this stuff that I've worked on for Grim Hollow for Ghostfire Gaming has been done for months. I'm doing final proofs on the books now. So we're not taking anything from this. This came out after the final versions were done. Right. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah,
about
I do
that.
the same thing. There are entire things that everybody says are great that I feel like I can't look at because I'm working at something kind of like it, and I just want my thoughts to be mine.
Yep. D&D Beyond has also added Ruins of Symbaroum with maps by CZPEKU. That's the best I can do on the pronunciation. Teos, you want to tell us what this is all about?
Yeah, it's an interesting expansion of third-party products. And we haven't covered every single one on the show, but I thought this was super interesting, kind of to show the breadth of what's being brought in and how maybe sometimes a deal is made and then you realize the problems. And so Ruins of Symbaroum, I was really interested because Symbaroum, which is a Free League product, a Free League RPG, has a 5th edition version. So, you could just bring it in, right? But when I looked at this is just the setting. I thought, well, that's interesting. And I looked at it, and the marketing thing says exclusively composed for the D&D Beyond platform. The product itself says that too. And then it says, the content has been gathered from several manuals, blah, 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 assembled into a comprehensive guide, blah, 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 blah. And it says, currently the D&D Beyond platform cannot fully capture these elements of the rule set, which explains why we have opted for a system-agnostic presentation of the setting. Right? So we wanted to put the rules in, but D&D Beyond can't handle them. So you just get the setting. I thought that was very interesting. So you get lore, locations, history, and 16 maps as part of it. And on the other side was just, I don't know if it's CZPEKU or how I'm supposed to say it, but from them, a popular cartographer, and you see their maps all over the place. They have a very popular Patreon. They have made 20 map packs, each with many maps underneath them, available, and they have some great names, Hell's Cocktail Lounge, Rope Bridge Chasm, Coliseum of Challenges, and more. And all of that is for the Maps application. No word about Sigil. And so you can buy these different individual sets to have those kinds of maps available all on the D&D Beyond Marketplace, which shows Wizards expanding beyond content in terms of adventures, source books, settings, to see now maps actually. So very interesting expansion. And not to be left undone, Sigil did make some noise, Shawn.
Yeah, they said that their 3D virtual tabletop has some additional free miniature releases and an update that will, quote, allow popular feature requests, including undo and redo in the builder and customizable skin tones in the custom mini maker. So they're still putting out updates. They're still, with the small staff that they have, are still keeping the virtual tabletop as an option. 3D virtual tabletop is an option for people that want such a play space. And play spaces were abundant at PAX East this weekend, including a surprise event. Which doesn't make much sense to me because you can't know to go to come to the surprise event if you don't know that the surprise event is happening. But it happened nonetheless. So PAX East had in Boston happened this weekend, and 2 days before it, there was a post on D&D Beyond letting us know that there would be a sneak peek of the upcoming Eberron Forge of the Artificer book in adventure form. This Eberron adventure was called Race for the Crab Temple. Crab Temple is one of my favorite dishes. And what's going on here? Your group has been dispatched by Morgrave University to travel to Zendrick and seek out the Crab Temple. It's a race between your expedition and a rival to discover its secrets. There was pre-made third-level characters provided, featuring rules from the new player's handbook and some first look options from Eberron Forge of the Artificer.
Yeah, and they had the Legends of Greyhawk campaign, they had Learn to Play, and the return of Chris Perkins as DM for Acquisitions Incorporated Live. I would not have bet that after his retirement he would continue DMing, but there he was. I have it queued, ready to watch it. With Mother's Day, I did not get to focus on that, but it is on my list for this week to watch and enjoy.
There you go. Going from the past of conventions to the future, some Gen Con D&D events have been announced and released. The catalog was released Sunday, and the events include a bunch of D&D options. First, we get a Forgotten Realms play preview. Be the first to try out new character options and an adventure from the upcoming Forgotten Realms Player's Guide and Adventure Guide, releasing in November of 2025. Third-level pre-generated characters provided. What else do we get? We get a starter set preview, a 20-minute demo. We have a 2-hour intro to D&D demos. Then we have a continuation of the Legends of Greyhawk campaign, actually the launch of it, I should say. So everything that we've seen so far, the Hamlet trilogy, A Village Called Hamlet, The Darkness of Nulb, and Ruins of the Moat House were previews of the actual campaign, which begin with the Greyhawk trilogy, Shadows over the Free City, Sword in the Shadows, and Murder Among Thieves. Those 3 adventures are part of the continuation then of this Legends of Greyhawk campaign,
those are perfect Greyhawk names, right? Like those could be Gary Gygax's novels from the Rogue
absolutely
series.
For sure. And they're also running the epic/interactive Battle of Emerald Meadows, which has been previewed previously and will be running again there. That not enough D&D for you? Well, Teos, we've got more.
What?
Because Baldman Games is partnering with Ghostfire Gaming to help with the launch of the Grim Hollow organized play campaign called The Grim Hunt.
Nice.
So if that's not enough D&D for you, you can have more in the form of 3 adventures, a Waldstein Possession, a Waldstein Haunting, and the Volstein Slaughter, a trilogy of adventures, as well as an epic called The Battle of Volstein. Those 3 are premiering. That is the launch of the Grim Hollow Organized Play campaign, which I am currently working on. So stop bothering me. Get out of my face. I've got some work to do.
Shawn, I love having a little Volstein when I'm eating my crab temple. I mean, just the two together just really washes it down.
Yep, exactly. And if you want to get a taste of the Ethereal Expanse from Ghostfire Gaming, this is not an organized play campaign, but they are individual one-shots that come in pre-generated characters. 3 adventures available: Treasure of Shipgrave Reef, Razorfin, and Whispers of Chaos. Fantastic. All of those will be available for you at Gen Con. And if you are a fan of D&D or of Ghostfire Gaming specifically, very soon they will be putting up...
You see, there was this incident about readied actions.
Yeah, and that was it.
Boycott everybody. I'm kidding.
You're going to go to Gen Con, and maybe you want to run some games. Baldman Games will have sign-up starting soon, where you can sign up to run any, all, or some of these adventures, and we will cover what you get if you run games at Gen Con for Baldman Games in a later episode. I am out of juice, Teos. Yeah. What's next?
Well, let me tell you about something really cool. Playing at the World Volume 2 is out. This is John Peterson's republishing of the second part of his original Playing at the World book that he split into 2 parts. So the first part is incredible, looking at the origins of D&D and the community that shaped what the products ended up being because of how they would influence things. On the D&D side, he covered that all in Volume 1, highly recommended. And then Volume 2 is now out that looks at the rest of the hobby. So, quote, addresses why the first role-playing game evolved around fantasy and medieval settings as opposed to some other historical setting. And the second pillar, the author explores how the rules of war games, from their roots in chess variants from 18th century Germany, developed into those of role-playing games. Finally, the third pillar focuses on character, perhaps the most elusive of the 3 pillars, and investigates how precedents govern the introduction of characters to games more so than the original D&D rulebooks. Mm-hmm. You can go to mitpress.mit.edu and find Playing at the World Volume 2, or link in our show notes.
And now it's everyone's favorite game show. Guess That Tariff.
Yeah.
So when I woke up this morning, the tariff was still at 145% to basically it's a tax on us of 145% from things coming from China. That tax has been lowered to 30%.
For 90
only
days.
For 90 days as negotiations continue. And of course, in 90 days, that's just about enough time to set up a plan to get things shipped, because you can't just snap your fingers and have things shipped. You have to deal with shipping companies and all sorts of supply chain issues. So by the time we're able to act on this, who knows what will have happened.
Right.
So what does it mean in the long run? It means absolutely nothing. We need, as businesses, the time and the solid planning criteria to make informed decisions. Yeah. Amen. Hallelujah. Holy, where's the Tylenol? All right.
Danny K. Yep.
Yes.
It's wild. It's wild. And my heart goes out to everybody who's dealing with that, to try to now rush to decide whether you, and it's not like 30% is some wonderful walk in the park. And so one of the things you also have to weigh in is, should I actually just wait? Because maybe as these negotiations continue, we end up in someplace else, and rushing now for 30% could be worse. Plus, I could get all these high shipping prices because everybody's trying to suddenly fill all the ships up. You know, that's the worst kind of decisions that someone could have to make in an already difficult industry.
Yep. But what's not difficult is knowing that Rodney Thompson is a great creator, and our Creator Corner highlights Neon City Outlaws, Rodney Thompson's new version of the game Dusk City Outlaws, and the Spectaculars. So on Kickstarter now, you can get Neon City Outlaws. If you don't know, Rodney Thompson was a key designer of 5th edition and is a great game designer in and of himself. Neon City Outlaws features fast, narratively compelling, and flexible gameplay using the 100 AC system. Neon City Outlaws is a heist game at its core, with the outlaw protagonists at the center of a revolution against an oppressive government and the nigh immortal executives that control the city's wealth. The game includes a lot of features, Teos. You tell us about those.
Create outlaws enhanced with cybernetics, genetic engineering, and psionics, or even fully synthetic bodies housing sentient artificial intelligences. Plan the heist using your own creativity. There's no right way to pull off the job, only your way. Load your character's mind into different bodies to gain access to the tools needed to pull off a job. Manifest as a digital avatar in the citywide virtual reality network, a set of electronic districts where the rules of the world do not apply. Take part in the fight against the corporate oligarchy with the Revolution, a phase of gameplay where players control the city's outlaw factions. That sounds cool. Support campaign play and one-shots alike. And the setting itself, we're told, is something that the players work to help shape and create. I've really enjoyed the other games like this, like Dust City Outlaws with its heist open play. It has a nice way of handling that prep time phase to minimize how long it takes, focus kind of cool jobs, have the flexibility to support whatever your plan might be, but the DM has ways to clearly mess with it and have fun with it to create a proper challenge. It's really smart system, and so I look forward to seeing this cyber version of it that looks awesome.
There you go. That was our news and commentary section.